And good morning, good evening. This is Nick Robotham, and I'm Indrid, and very nice to, well, we've already seen some of you. I'm not sure if everybody is online. We're doing a screen share that we can't see everybody, but whoever's here, thank you for coming. And this is obviously a workshop for the AAAJ special issue. I'm very lucky that Nick is here in Adelaide for a visit. And it was a great opportunity to catch up, to discuss obviously the special issue. So just to keep to the agenda, because we are on a sort of tight time schedule, what we'll do is that Nick and I will just have a brief presentation about what we are trying to achieve with a special issue in terms of the broad objectives, the broader research questions, and then and then we'll just get everybody who's indicated an interest, all right, to present their ideas, to basically talk about them. We'll try and time both. I'm going to time myself, and Nick. I will time Nick as well. We're just going to keep the presentation, all right, to 10 minutes, so that there is that opportunity for discussion. Now, we have already looked at the PowerPoints or abstracts or titles that some of you have kindly sent to us, and we do have some feedback, but obviously we are also open to you, just providing some feedback as well. That's all right as an agenda? Yeah. Okay, we're doing some screen sharing here, so everybody can see our slides and can hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes. Cool.
On my part.
Now, where are we coming from with the special issue? Now, so I'm going to start my timing, obviously, so that I don't exceed it. All right. Okay. Now, to start with, we thought that it's a good idea to be very specific about the technology that we are referring to in relation to this special issue, because we understand that technology can be interpreted in very different ways. So we thought it's important to have that sort of that general, that definition clarified right up front. So when we're talking about digital corporate reporting, what we mean for this special issue is that we're looking at that any technology, or that has or creates capacity to capture and present data at a granular level. So we're really looking at tagging technologies. Obviously, the one that we are looking at, that we believe is the one that is most widely used, is the XBRL technology, Extensible Business Language, which is obviously, excuse me, a successor of XML. And where we're coming from with this is that this kind of technology obviously encourages or facilitates machine readability. And as a result of that, obviously you have enhanced accessibility of financial or non-financial information, that is of digital corporate report or corporate report information. I mean, we think that obviously having using that type of technology has a huge number of implications in terms of how the data might be recorded, how the data might be classified, and obviously how firms, how preparers will prepare their financial reports, but also how users are going to use it. And if obviously preparers and users are using the technology, they would be guided by some work that accounting standard setters would have done. And we are familiar, obviously, in this forum that, well, you have standard setters like the IASB and, of course, other local or domestic standard setters across different jurisdictions. They are preparing, taxonomies in that particular sense. So there are obviously implications for standard setters that we can elaborate a little bit more in a bit more detail a little bit later. But if you have obviously entities that are filing using this technology or preparing their digital reports, you can imagine that there is also audit implications in that sense. So we think that this is a great area to research, and part of the reason is because there is many international mandates, all right, many mandates around the world. And as I'm sure you're familiar, you have the US, where digital reporting was mandated since 2009. You have the EU, more recent, but a massive jurisdiction, obviously, the UK, and China since 2004. And more recently, obviously, we have the ISB coming up with their taxonomy, and obviously there are other standards that could leverage on this technology. So in that particular sense, we think there is enough usage across significant jurisdictions where that we could do research on, that research could be done. And then the we basically is whoever takes up on that. Now, we've done a fair bit of, we've done a literature review, Nick and I, a couple of years ago, which got published in the Australian Accounting Review, and where we looked at research up to that point in time. And taking stock on that, we found that predominantly the research in that digital corporate reporting space is taking functionalist, they're doing pretty much functionalist approaches, where the technology is used as an exogenous intervention. And then these papers mainly are looking at, well, how the capital market indicators are being affected. And they are attributing, and they're finding variation across a range of these capital market indicators, and they are attributing those changes to the technology. The thing that we believe hasn't been done, and that's one of the key points that we make in that paper, is that, well, they're not explaining, or they're not, excuse me, the research is not looking at, well, how are the business processes being affected that are ultimately responsible for the changes in these capital market indicators. And we think that that is a significant gap. So that is the area that is largely untapped. And that's where we're coming from with this special issue, looking at there are gaps in how and why this technology shapes and is shaped by the practices of preparers, users, auditors, and also the standard setters in that particular sense. Right? Obviously, if you're looking at the type of the questions that we are asking, and we were lucky to basically to be accepted at AAAJ for this special issue, we think that their methodology, as per AAAJ policy, is very consistent with the type of questions that we are asking, and therefore the type of methodology that we're looking at that suits answering those types of questions is interpretative and critical approaches, and it's essentially looking at interdisciplinary inductive and abductive type of research. So we're not really looking at deductive type of research, partially because it's not consistent with the type of questions that we're looking at, but more importantly also that it's pretty much against the AAAJ policy. So AAAJ makes it very clear that these are the kinds of approaches that we're looking at. And obviously at that high level, or if that translates obviously at a lower level with type of qualitative and even quantitative methods, but that have interpretative or critical basis for looking at the data. So this is essentially the kind of focus that we are looking at for the submissions. And Nick, have I forgotten anything about? Have I forgotten anything about those bits?
Okay, so I was just going to talk about some of the issues that we put into the special issue core that we think are interesting and worthy of some research. I suppose the big broad question is thinking about is the mode of communication moving to digital, is that affecting what is being communicated? So if we think about the preparation of digital reports, we've got different types of reporting. We've got obviously financial reporting, and we've also, with all the new sustainability standards, both in the EU, the ISSB and the GRI, and a lot of the regulation coming in, it's linked to digital reporting. So interested in how firms cope with these regulations, how they tag, how they prepare their reports. Do they do it in-house, bolt on? What are the issues that come up? Thinking about, how the tagging of, say, entity-specific disclosures is undertaken, how anchoring rules are applied, double tagging, for example. And we also have some of the tagging firms, how they use AI in suggesting what tags are applied across corporate reports, disclosure choices and labelling, and whether firms are seeking to conform to the taxonomy and move their disclosures closer to it, and thinking about some of the patterns there. So in relation to some of the research we've looked at before, I suppose we're interested in, is digital communication going to change disclosure and disclosure practices? Does the digital tail affect the dog, the disclosure dog, if you like? And will reports and digital reports become more homogenized, more standardized over time? Thinking about standard setting, we know that the new standards, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, they're digital first, so the ISSB standards, they come with a taxonomy the first time round. And thinking about, does considering digital communication change standard setting? Does it change the level of disclosure that standard setters want, given that, say, information overload might be conceived of differently? Also thinking about location of disclosure. Is that going to be important in the future if all disclosure is digitized? And again, linking to notions such as standardization, uniformity, and comparability. Thinking about auditing and assurance. Again, a lot of the new mandates across the world, in the EU, the recent mandate in the US has just come out. They require forms of assurance, limited moving to reasonable. So I think this provides an opportunity for thinking about how we assure digital reporting, what processes are used, how this changes the process of assurance, how we conceive of materiality in that assurance when we're looking at data or digital processes as opposed to human readable reports. And thinking about, how audit standards can deal with or accommodate digital dissemination. And then moving to users, I still think there's open questions about who is using it. It's being used by data providers and aggregators. But what about investors themselves? Are they directly using it or just using it through data aggregators and providers? And what about smaller scale investors? How are they using it? How is it changing their analysis practices? Theoretically, they can download huge data sets and specific disclosures across wide samples. Does this change analysis practices? We also have some of those notions I talked about before, things of atomization of data. Data is decontextualized potentially with digital reporting, where a number can be unrelated to the context, which perhaps explains some of the information about that number. And is that going to change how information is used in different ways? And finally, we also have regulators, another body who can use digital reporting. And again, we're told this is being used in supervision and monitoring across the world, but little is known about how it's used and how it might change monitoring, what can be done in these supervisory roles in different markets. So just a quick overview of some of the issues that digital reporting can invoke research within.
And so that was the list. I mean, obviously, we've identified a range of topics that we think are interesting. But if there are other areas within those broad tracks that we have identified, we are obviously open to look at them. That's why in the call for papers, we just note that this is including, but not necessarily limited to, for as long as they are looking at that type of technology. Now, the submission instructions are quite straightforward. Obviously, these are in the online version of the special issue. It will be open from the 1st of July, but obviously individuals might like to start working straight away if they're interested. And we've deliberately basically are organizing this workshop now to provide feedback so that there is sufficient time to develop the paper and obviously submit by the due date, which is October the 1st later this year. And we're supposed to follow the AAAJ submission instructions. So all submissions ought to be done via the AAAJ website via Manuscript Central, and the papers need to be formatted as per AAAJ guidelines. At the time when the submission opened, there will be a special issue listed over there, right? And obviously, those people who submit are supposed to select that special issue. And now obviously we do have a Q&A set for the end of the event, but if there is any questions basically that are more specific about what we've just provided, obviously please feel free, because we do have a few more minutes left of our session that we can use for those questions.